Hey guys, it's Will from Magic the Friendly Tavern, and today I'm actually playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and I'm doing a deck tech. We are going to be doing a deck tech on my Necrovalley Stun deck. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so usually what we're looking for is a hand that looks something like this. The main idea behind the deck is to actually prevent my opponent from playing the game. And that sounds awful, and it is, and most people call this a toxic deck. But honestly, it is the most competitive deck I have, and it works. It's considered tier 3 because it has a very terrible going second option. Like, you go first, you're pretty good. But going second, it's really not that great at breaking boards. We could shore this up a little bit, change it a little, and see where we can go from there. This is just my version. There are several different ways to build this deck, but so far this is what I'm working with. So let's begin. The first card we're going to talk about is Yugioh the Spiritualist. I run 3. You can discard one random card from your hand to the graveyard, destroy all special summon monsters on the field. This is not a quick effect, so this ability is usually going to hit 1,000 negates on turn 2, but sometimes it is useful to clear a board. The most important ability we're worried about is this: neither player can special summon monsters. That's what we want to shut down the hardest, because that prevents 90 to 95 to 99% of the decks from actually ever doing anything. We extend this by playing the Barrier Statue of Torrent. Neither player can special summon monsters except water monsters. There's only a few decks that run water monsters. Very few. So this card is usually relevant. It's got a little higher stats than Yugioh, and we just want to have as many of this effect as we can get that's reasonable. So the next card in the list is Commandant, but we're going to skip him and Ryo. We're going to talk about Fossil Dyna Pack. If this card is flipped face up, which it's not a flip effect monster, so that's your opponent has to attack into it and not destroy it off the field to get it to activate this ability, but destroy all special summon monsters on the field. Neither player can special summon monsters. 1,200, 1,300 stats, so it's much better than Yugioh, better than Barrier Statue of Torrent. Does the same thing, fills the same role, so that gives us main board 7 of these effects. Next is Ryo, we'll talk about. He is a 1900, 800. Neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them. During either player's turn, when an opponent would special summon exactly one monster, you can send this face-up card to the graveyard, negate the special summon, and if you do, destroy it. So his best effect is not letting them add cards to their deck except for by drawing them, so it stops special searches, but it also stops our special searches too, and we'll get to that. So he can turn us off. That's why we're running as a 1-of. Now, if we had a different build, we could go with 3 of these guys and cut a lot of our search, and he's pretty effective, but he's definitely not a Fossil Dyna or a Yugioh right off the bat. So I don't really like running him at 3. It's kind of hit or miss. Then we have Inspector Border. This is a long thing to read, and I'm just going to sum it up. First, he cannot be normal or special summon if you control a monster, but you can set him and then flip him face up if you already control a monster, so that's good. But the biggest thing to take away is neither player can activate monster effects unless there are special extra deck monsters on the field. For each different type of extra deck monster, each player can activate one ability per turn. So say you have a fusion and exceeds, that's 2 abilities. A link and exceeds and a synchro, that's 3 abilities that can both players can activate. The biggest takeaway, though, is if there are no extra deck monsters on the field, neither player can activate activations of creatures. And so that will shut off, like, our first abilities, but these flat effects that keep players from special summoning will stay in effect. So will Ryo's, neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand. So Inspector Border just shuts down activated abilities. This stops normal summons that they can use to enable to go into, or other utility creatures that could, or monsters, I'm sorry, that could take out ours, or let them search for stuff to remove our monsters. It's really effective. Border is great. Border is really good, especially with that 2000 attack. It really gets through a lot of stuff, since all of our other creatures are pretty weak. Then I am running one Amanto Iwato. It is a rock spirit and cannot be special summoned. It needs to be normal summoned. Monsters cannot activate their effects, except spirit monsters. Once per turn at the end phase, if this card was normal summoned or flip face up this turn, return this card to the hand. So he comes down and stops monster effects, but only on the turn that you normal summon him. And that's kind of bad, but it is a stopgap measure and can get you there, but sometimes he's a brick. You don't have to run it. It is restricted to one. But if you have this out with Inspector Border, and there are no extra deck monsters, this effect will not activate. So, potentially, I mean, it kind of seems redundant. But if your opponent is able to get an extra deck monster out through a border, and you have both Amano Iwato and Inspector Border on there, they're still locked out. Even though later Amano will bounce back to hand. I mean, it's on the chopping block. It's one of the first cards I cut. But just having 3 Inspector Border really puts us thin on that effect. And having a stopgap measure does feel correct. Again, it would be the first card I would put in the no pile, but I do get value off of it from time to time. It's not terrible. I might figure out some tricks later to do with it to make it easier to activate at other times when it's more relevant, but I'm still working on that. There's not a lot of room in this deck for practically anything, and the special attack is kind of cheese anyways. You just want good solid options. Also, Inspector Border shuts down all of our activated abilities, and that kind of hurts, but it's worth it. Speaking of which, I'm also running one Rella. I'm still on the fence about Rella. Putting Rella out turn 1 by herself and discarding a card to grab a moon is not good. She should come down after one of your other lock pieces does, so you can shore up the moon. The only problem is her effect. It's good, but it's a double-edged sword. Okay, so I'll explain. Neither player can target monsters on the field with spell cards or effects, except this one. Once per turn, you can discard one spell, equip one equipped spell from your hand, deck, or graveyard to this card, but return the equipped spell to hand during the end phase. Rella makes it to where you can't equip Moon to your other creatures, only her, and then it gets bounced back to hand. So, honestly, fetching Moon is good, but with Rella out, it makes it ineffective to put on Joglin, and that's kind of an issue. But this also means that your monsters can't be easily removed by spell cards while she's out. So, there is counterplay there. I'm still working out the minutia of it, but I feel one of is correct. But this might change with time. I'm still on the fence about this card. It's good sometimes, but if it's in your opener, it's pretty bad. Then you have your Searchers. Commandant, you can discard it to get Necrovalley. We'll get to Necrovalley here soon. And then you have Dogmatica Ecclesia. Cannot be destroyed by battle with monsters special summon from the extra deck, which is nice. You can use the following effects of Ecclesia once per turn. If a special summon monster from the extra, or if a monster special summon from the extra deck is on the field, I can special summon her from my hand. If it's normal or special summoned, I can activate this effect. Add one Dogmatica card from your deck to your hand, except her. Also cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. We don't special summon, so this is fine. What this allows us to do is get a Dogmatica card, which will be removal for us. Dogmatica Punishment. And that's why we do have extra deck monsters, so we can use with Dogmatica Punishment, but this lets us search it out, which is nice. Alright, moving on. So that's my creatures. There are 16 in all. This allows us to hit a good number, but try not to brick by having too many creatures, but it does happen. The next thing we have is card draw, because we need to hit our setup. We need a lock piece, a moon to protect it, some type of negate to protect the moon and the lock piece, and hopefully either a Necrovalley or some other type of removal to deal with problems that crop up. So that's a lot to ask for from every hand, but we can't get there. So the first card draw spell we have is Card of Demise. You draw until you have 3 cards, so if you have more than 3 cards, you can't activate this. You can activate this when it's the 3rd card in your hand, but you draw 1, so forth and so on. You really want to be casting this empty-handed. I do run this at 2 a lot of the time. I just have it at 1 for now because I'm trying some stuff out. Now, you gotta be aware that the turn you activate this card, you cannot damage your opponent. And at the end step of that turn, you also have to send your entire hand to the graveyard. So whatever you did not use will go to the graveyard. Be aware of that. Sometimes you have to set cards on the field face down to get them out of your hands so you can cast Card of Demise. That's why sometimes I don't run it 2 of. And you also cannot special summon, but that's, irrelevant. Mostly it's over like Ecclesia maybe. So good card, good in this deck. Probably should be 2 of, but it's fine. Next, I run Pot of Duality, which you excavate the 3 top cards of your deck and add one of them to your hand. You shuffle the rest back into your deck, and you can only activate 1 duality per turn, and you cannot special summon the turn you activate this card. So it lets you look at the top 3 and get the best card. The next one, you have to do this on your main phase 1. That's the first action you take per turn. Banish 3 or 6 random face down cards from your extra deck. We do not care unless it hits all 3 of our end tests, but that rarely happens. You draw 1 card for every 3 cards banished. So if you banish 6, you draw 2 cards. You can't use other card to draw effects for this turn. That's fine. Really good. It's a 1 of, restricted to 1. Duality's 2. Sometimes I do run duality at 2. There are other pots in the game, like the one that exiles top 10 cards of your library. I don't like running it because it can mill you to the point that where your small creatures attacking in every turn will not make fast enough clock on your opponent to take them out of the game before you deck yourself. It's super risky. If you want to run it, that's cool, but I stick to these pots mostly. We also have 1 Nadir Servant, which lets us send an extra deck monster, or 1 monster from the extra deck to the graveyard. Add 1 Dogmatica monster from the deck to our hand. You can do a Fallen Albaz, but that's irrelevant. That has attack less than or equal to the sent monster. You cannot special summon for the extra deck. You can only activate 1. Okay, so this allows us to search out Ecclesia, or 1 copy, which then allows us to search out our Dogmatica. So it's kind of a circle loop, but it does put us out a creature and a removal. So it's pretty decent. Again, if Ecclesia has already been played or in the graveyard or wherever, this is a dead card. Keep that in mind. Just know about it. So that's why it's at a 1 of. That and it's slow. Normal spell. Oh, another pot, I'm sorry. Pot of Prosperity. So you get to banish, again, it's kind of like Extravagance. You get to ban 3 or 6 cards from your extra deck, face down. But you choose them. You get to pick which ones you want to get rid of. So usually I get rid of 2 Skull Knights. I get rid of 2 the 5-headed dragon. I get rid of maybe one of the Tri-Brigades and maybe a Garua or a Wind Pegasus, whichever one is more relevant. We will get to that. And then you get to excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of cards you banish. So always banish 6. Add, if you can, add 1 of those cards to your hand and place the rest on the bottom. You can only activate one a pop per turn, and you cannot use any draw card effects the turn you activate this. Also, I do believe your opponent takes half damage. Yes, they do. So it's decent. It digs really far into your deck and finds what you need. It's a really decent pot. It's good. The next thing we have is Time Tearing Morganite, because we're one of the few decks that can run this card and not be hit by its downside, because you activate this and you apply all of these effects. You cannot activate monsters' effects in the hand. We don't run any hand traps. All of our guys hit the board. She can special summon from hand. It'll shut her off, but you can normal summon her to get the same effect. It's not that bad. So then you draw 2 cards instead of 1 card for your normal draw during your draw phase. That's card advantage. That's really, really good for us. That keeps us moving. Keeps us getting into what we need to stay relevant. And then you can also conduct 2 normal summons sets per turn, not just 1. So if we have multiple of the Floodgate guys in our hand, we can pop them on the field and really shut our opponent down really hard. This is a really good spell for us. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then discard 1 Time Tearing Morganite. Your opponent cannot activate monster effects when you normal summon this turn. That's sometimes relevant, but again, sometimes not. You have to have both of these in your hand and only run the 2, not the 3. I don't think you should run 3. I think it should stay at 2. So it's hard to do, but then Necrovalley. Necrovalley is going to change a lot of stuff. So again, like Commandant searches out Necrovalley. Now, what Necrovalley does is makes Commandant bigger, makes it 2100 attack, but that's not the point. Cards in graveyards cannot be banished. That's excellent. Negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place. That's what we want. This stops things from being summoned out of the graveyard straight onto the battlefield. Locks a lot of stuff down. Keeps Bistle from exiling cards from your graveyard to special summon. This just solves a lot of problems. Shuts off the Runic Fountain. Against Runic, this will shut their fountain off. They will try and shuffle the 3 cards from the graveyard into their library. They can't. And the draw 3 effect from the fountain is predicated on them shuffling those cards into their library. So that just stops that. Excellent. So we run 3 of and 2 Commandant because we want to see this often. Now we also have the Moon Mirror Shield. And the Moon Mirror Shield is kind of fundamentally broken when it comes to equipment. Equipment is awful in this game because it's an inherent 2-for-1. If they remove your monster, your equipment goes away. They used 1 card to remove 2 of yours. They're up card advantage. It's really not a good place to be, but this is one of the best equipment I think in the game that is really good. So what this does is when your equipped monster battles an opponent's monster during the damage calculation, the equipped creature's attack and defense become equal to the attack and defense of the opponent's battling monster plus 100. This allows us to win all combats. So yes, even Jogwin at 200 points can put on a Moon Mirror Shield and go toe-to-toe with a Blue Eyes White Dragon. It just can. This keeps our Floodgate monsters from just getting rolled by normal summon starters. This is essential to winning. That's why we run it as a 3 of, and we also run other effects to go get it, like Rella and Armory Call. But we'll get to Armory Call. So this is like imperative to have. You can survive a little bit without it, but you really need to get a Moon Mirror Shield as soon as you can. Moving on, we have Cosmic Cyclone. This is a quick effect or quick play spell, I'm sorry. You pay 1,000 life and target one spell or trap on the field and banish it. This is back row removal, which we need access to, partially. And quick play means that if they set a trap and they go to their end phase and we already have this set, we can bust it before it becomes active. And banishing it makes sure that it doesn't have any graveyard effects or comes back. It's just really good. Now, be careful using it against Kashtira, since Kashtira can recycle some of their stuff out of banish. So be aware of that. But I prefer this over Mystical Space Typhoon because it banishes more relevant stuff, mainly branded spells and other spells that have graveyard effects. So you can run Mystical Space Typhoon in its place, but you need a little bit of back row removal. Now, Dogmatic Punishment does help, but this has to target a creature. So if they only have back row, this is basically your only option. And it's faster than Feather Duster. Feather Duster hits more, but they're going to activate in response to Feather Duster. This can get them before they can. Okay, so our one hand trap. The only hand trap we can run because Border shuts off hand traps. Hand traps are not what we're trying to do. And we want to keep a low creature count anyways. And use our draw effects to get into other stuff. So all we have is Imperm. Imperm's the only spell we can cast on our opponent's turn while they're trying to do something. So these are clutch. These are basically your bread and butter. They also will stop monsters, and they will stop back row if they're set. So target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and then if this card was set before activation in the field resolution, it turns off all spell or trap effects in the column that it's in. If you control no cards, you can activate it from your hand. So, yeah, this is our one hand trap. Infinite Imperm is the best hand trap in the game, hands down, and it's ran in every deck. You should be running 3 of these, no matter what your build is. It's that good. It's that important. So next we have Armory Call. Armory Call is pretty simple, but it's sneaky. It is super sneaky. People don't see this coming. And I run 2 of them, even though I run the Ryo, and could shut it off because it gets Moon. That's all it gets is Moon. But it does it at spell speed 2 because it's a trap. And you can do it during the battle phase when your opponent attacks into your monster. Or you can attack in with your monster and then activate it. So the window for activating this, you just want to wait until your opponent's in battle because there's a lot less effects that can go off during the battle phase. And it will make them swing into your monster, and they will lose it because you put the Moon on. The Moon activates. They lose their monster. They didn't see it coming. They just blindly attacked into you. It's great. It's wonderbar. It's awesome. I really like Armory Call. It really, for equipment fetch spells and traps, there's not really a better one. There is a quick play spell I think it's a normal or quick play spell. But you have to dip the top card of your library into your graveyard for whatever reason. Which seems really irrelevant. But it doesn't allow you to actually set or activate the equipment the turn that you put it in your hand. While this just allows you to activate it immediately and put it on the appropriate monster. So this is so much better than that other card. I think the other one is called Armory, or I'm not sure what it is, but it's awful. Then we have Dogmatic Punishment. You target one monster your opponent controls, send one extra deck monster with higher or equal attack to your graveyard, from your extra deck to the graveyard, and if you do, destroy that monster. Until the end of your next turn after this resolves, you cannot special summon monsters. That's fine. You can only activate one of these. So you target a monster, send one of your extra deck monsters to the graveyard, and take them out. So the best one is Intis. The second best one is Garua, if you can get it. And these are in here to hit high attack value monsters. But the thing about our extra deck monsters is they all have extra abilities that trigger when they're sent to the graveyard. The only caveat of this is besides Intis and Garua, all the other extra deck monsters that have effects besides the Quintet Magician of the Five-Headed Dragon, they will not be able to be activated if you're under Necrovalley. Necrovalley will prevent you from banishing them or to activate their abilities. I do believe this one will also activate too. Yes, it will. Okay, so Intis, what it does, this is the best one, 2,500 attack, so you can hit anything 2,500 or below. When it's sent to the graveyard, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. So this is a 2-for-1. Well, it's not really, because you're using the punish. Well, it is, because it's coming from the extra deck. So the punishment activates, send Intis, blow up 2 things. Timing is a little tricky on it, because it will wait for the if it's number 2 in a chain, it'll wait for the first ability in that chain to resolve before this ability will proc, and you'll get to blow up the other card. So sometimes it's tricky on the timing to hit exactly what you want, but it is very, very effective. This guy, if you don't have Necrovalley out, you can, on your turn, banish him from your graveyard and target one monster on the field to destroy it. So he can 2-for-1 as well, but 2,400 attack or less. 1,700 attack or less, and that's pretty low, but you can banish him from your graveyard and target one spell or trap on the field and destroy it. So it's back row removal. Again, irrelevant under Necrovalley, but it is clutch in some games, and it has to happen on your turn. Garua, though, can activate through Necrovalley because it doesn't remove itself from the graveyard, and it draws you a card. But it's 1,500 or less, so targets are very sparse with that, but drawing an extra card is awesome. Sending this with the, oh boy, Nadir Servant is great. It just draws you an extra card. It replaces the Nadir Servant, so it's card neutral. It's awesome. Really good. Again, these are only in there to hit really large monsters and have no effect. Winged Pegasus can be banished from the graveyard to target one card your opponent controls and shuffle it in their deck. A really, really good ability. Again, cannot be activated through Necrovalley, but if you plan out your stuff just right, all these non-bows and non-interactions you have in your deck, you can play around yourself. You just got to be aware of what you need to do and when you need to do it. It takes a little practice, but honestly, this is not a brain buster deck. It's got a pretty simple layout, few tricks, and it's basically put lock down, protect lock. If lock sticks, your opponent cannot play, you win. Now going second, it's a lot harder, and I might work with some of my peeps to try and brainstorm some ways to make it better on the second play. But I know from experience that just adding in going second cards to this build will not help you, because it will break your hand on if you go first and prevent you from locking at all. So there was a little minutia there. It's got to be worked out. But I mean, like, plenty of people play this deck and are on this deck, so there's tech out there, but it's limited. And speaking of which, I'm going to show y'all some extra tech at the end of this. Now, this right here is Solemn Judgment. This is our bread and butter. This is our Omni Negate that will stop anything that's trying to remove our lock. Spell Trap, Monster Summon, whatever. Pay half our life and negate it. And we want to specifically hit and only hit anything that threatens our lock. That is all, because this is like clutch. Mainly, the worst cards that we get hit with that really mess us up are Lightning Storm and Feather Duster, Harpy's Feather Duster. Those cards will just ruin your day if you do not have a Judgment. And I would love more Omni Negates, but they're very few and far between. Very, very few and far between. I can show y'all a few that kind of work, but we'll get to that. Next is Crackdown, Continuous Trap. This card is excellent. Okay, so if we have a problematic creature, or we don't have a lockdown, and we need to get a starter off the field or an extender to stop working, depending on timing, depending on abilities, this card will do it for us. It also does not send to the graveyard or banish. It just simply puts that creature on our side of the field and negates its abilities and makes it cannot attack. It's a brick wall, but it just removes any problematic monster. And I know I keep saying creature when I should say monster. I play Magic, so creature, monster are interchangeable to me, but I'm trying to keep the correct lingo with the game, but forgive me. So this removes any problematic monster out of our way and just shuts them down. Also, if we're like close to swinging for lethal and they try to put out a blocker, it has to hit a face-up monster, but if they put out something that can get in our way, we can just remove it. It's great. I like Crackdown a lot. I run it in a lot of other decks. It's really effective removal when you think about it. So that's it. I did mention this guy lets us draw a card if we shuffle a card from our hand on the bottom of our deck. It's 1600 if you send it. I don't know if I did or not. Oops. But it's fine. This one, I rarely ever throw this to the graveyard. It is so much better with Garura, but it is relevant. So that's the deck tech. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go look at some a different tech that can be used for the deck. Forgive me a second. I've been debating on this card right here. It's a level 8 Pendulum Summon monster, which means like you can reveal it. I mean, we don't have any other Pendulum monsters to special summon it, and that would go against our deck. But if it's in the Pendulum Zone, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead except monster cards. Kind of irrelevant, it's hard to say. But, it is a floodgate effect. It is a flat effect, so it won't get hit by border. It's an idea. Then we get down here. Double check. Yes. Spells you can play. I mean, you can run Regeki and Feather Duster, but I just don't think they're relevant enough. You can try Change of Heart. I don't think Change of Heart would be good in this deck. Now that I think about that. You can try Triple Tactic Silence, but usually it's dead. It's just super dead in this build. It just doesn't work. I mean, you can try to get it to work, but it's not great. Spellbound. Spellbound could be ran in this deck. The Spellbound is such a niche card, and it's so hit or miss. It's very very narrow. Very narrow. Things like Called by the Grave sound good in theory, but you have Necrovalley. So Necrovalley will blank this card, and I'm not trying to run anything that's going to be dead. Yes, you can run Super Poly, but again, if you're locked under any of your dudes, Super Poly's dead, and we're trying to prevent that. Even though we do have non-bows and ways to make cards in our deck dead, we're just trying to mitigate that. Lightning Storm's an idea. Dark Ruler No More. You can try and run a board breaker build with the floodgate creatures, but in my experience, it just does not pan out very well. And that's sad because I'm a big fan of Dark Ruler No More. I think it's an awesome card, but it is so slow. Next, we can talk about a few traps. There is Red Reboot. That's a thing. That can stop Labyrinth, but that's pretty much the only deck it's relevant against. But it is an idea. I don't know. Solemn Strike is good going second, and sometimes I do run it, even as a 3-of, just stops, monster effects being activated. They're negates. And it can't stop special summons. This card is relevant for this build. I'll just say that. Yeah. So, there's Gravekeeper's Trap, but that's not what we're doing. And then we get down here, and there are higher level floodgate monsters, such as Vanity's Fiend, but all of our guys just normal summon, like, to the field with no problems and don't need a tribute, and they just work. This takes an extra card. This is just card disadvantage. Yes, it's bigger, but it can be removed just as easily as our other guys, so it's just not any better. Then we get down here to the level 4s. Kaiko would be interesting, but Necrovalley would stop his first effect, and banishing our opponent banishing cards from graveyards is kind of irrelevant against everything but Cash, and Cash doesn't even really do it that often. So it's meh. It's eh. Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about Tribe Infecting Virus. I've thought about Makura. I have Grave Protector, which shuffles monsters into the deck instead of going to the graveyard. But again, we have Necrovalley, and this has 0 attack. So if I just slam it down there, it can die to anything if I don't have exactly Moon. That's not good. That's awful. It has no flip effect, so it's risky, and its effect is kind of already covered. Sometimes I do run Necroface, because if it's normal summon, you can shuffle all banished cards back into your deck, and it gets bigger. And if it is banished, everybody banishes 5 cards. It's kind of irrelevant. So far, every time I've ran this card, even against Cash, even against Runic, I've never been able to normal summon it and shuffle any banished cards back into my deck. I've never gotten it bigger. I don't know. It can work, but then again, it's kind of superfluous. It doesn't always meet the requirement you need. You could run other statues, I guess, but they don't have the wind one, because that would actually be the best one to run. But this is the next best one, and people run so many dark based attribute decks that this card will not catch anything. Same thing with a light based. There are earth creatures. There are a few earth creature decks out there, so this one's meh. And there are fire decks out there too, so both of these are kind of just not that great. Next, we can talk about Dimension Fortress Weapon. Cards cannot be sent from the deck to the graveyard, which branded does that, but it's such a narrow effect. It's super narrow. If you're running into a lot of branded, I put it in, but I just don't think the effect's worth it. Moving on, sometimes I use Psyblocker, but it's hit or miss, and it's an activated ability, but it can be shut off a border. So there's that issue. Again, sometimes I experiment with it, but I've pretty much already tried everything I can with this deck, so I know what works and what doesn't. I can run more Rellas. Let me see what else is relevant down here. I'm sorry, this is so guerrilla style. Mainly, the only other thing that we can run that's a flat effect that won't get shut off by a border that we can rely on is Naturia Rose Whip. And this card is good. It stops your opponent from playing multiple spells and traps. It seems good. The problem is that 400 attack. Without Moon on it, because you really want your Moon on the one that stops the special summons or the border, putting Moon on this is effective, but it allows your opponent to activate one trap or spell. That's usually enough. So if this card said no spells or traps, it'd be awesome, but it doesn't. That's not what it says. It says one spell or trap. It only matters if they're activating multiple spells or traps, and if they're not, then it's not relevant, and it's really too small to protect itself. So it's hit or miss. It's not great. It's it's marginal depending on matchup. And in a Master Duel, that's how it is. Now, over here, we can keep going. This is a flat effect. Cannot be destroyed by battle twice, but it's, yeah. Let me get to... here we go. Then there is... Double checking, I didn't miss anything. Then there is Testudo. I'm not sure. This card, neither player can special summon monsters with 1800 or more attack. That's great. That's a great ability. This can also go into the deck. I've experimented with it, but it has 0 attack. So if you slam it down face up to get this effect, you absolutely have to have Moon. If you put this out without Moon, it will not survive. That's why it's not currently in the deck. That's why I hedge running it. Is just simply because it dies to everything. Plus, we have, you know, enough of those effects, mainly, that we don't need another one, especially one as weak as it is. Then, if we go down, there are some other pendulum monsters that aren't super effective. This is kind of nice, though. If you can activate him, you can negate effects of one extra deck monster, but it's not super relevant. There's not really anything super great down here that's just really going to help us out. And as we go further down, there are some spells and traps we could try. I mean, we are running 3 Necrovalley. Royal Tribute would be hilarious, but I just think it's too hit or miss for this deck. You really just want everything to come together, so it's not always a great option. You know, you could run the other pot. You could run Herald of the Abyss, if you wanted. I thought about running Kaiser Coliseum as well. There is also a power filter. Neither player can special summon monsters with 1000 or less attack, but that's not super relevant all the time. That rarely happens. You know, you could also shut down monsters with 1500 or more attack can't attack. That could also work. Moving on, you know, you have options for your spells and traps. When you get to the normal monsters, it really goes downhill on floodgate effects that we can cast, you know, on our normal summon per turn. The only one that I can think of is one that makes your opponent where they have to cast their spells. They can't cast it on main phase 1. They have to do it after combat on main phase 2, but it's marginal. Anyways, my name's been Will with Magic the Friendly Tavern. This is my deck tech on Necrovalley Stun, or Anti-Meta Stun. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. Happy pack pulls, and as always, happy games.